Painting is supposed to be fun and enjoyable, and I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I just need a reset. I have to take a moment and paint something simply for the fun of painting without the pressure of having to get it right or perfect. So I hope you'll join me today because that is the purpose of this tutorial. As most of you know, if you've watched many of my tutorials, I prefer to have some sort of drawing or outline, but as part of my reset and step back from pressure painting, I'm just going to freehand things today and just go with the flow of the painting in the moment. The good news is that this painting really isn't hard to do if you feel up to following along. So besides our watercolor paper, paints, and water, we of course need some brushes. Today I will be using a number 10 round for the larger flower petals, a number 1 rigger for some thin detail lines, and then today I'm actually going to be pulling out a small cat's tongue brush to paint in the leaves of this piece. This is a brush that is going to be included in my upcoming subscription boxes, and I have to tell you, it's becoming one of my favorites. This is a 3/8 cat tongue, so if you happen to have a similar size, please pull it out and give it a try. But if you don't, then no worries, you can just use a round brush for your leaves instead. But either way, I think you'll enjoy learning a new brush stroke using this different shaped brush today. Now, just to get started here, even though this is going to be a free-handed piece, it can be helpful to maybe make some light marks where the centers of the flowers are going to be, just to help figure out the composition and placement of things, but this is totally optional. I plan to have one flower more in the top right and then one down just a little ways below that, more off to the left. Just make sure to leave some room at the base of the page for some greenery. I'll just tape my paper down with some artist tape really quickly, and then we'll be all set. Now, I've already got a little bit of the color that I like to use on my tray, so I'll just freshen this up a bit. And of course, this painting would work with any color that you want to use. I'd like to try a nice light peachy orange color. I'll mix this color to get it just how I like, so let's take a little bit of cadmium orange. And then I'll add a touch of alizarin crimson in here to soften that color a little bit, just so it's not quite so bright. This color will have a little bit of extra water in it as well to keep it lighter in value. I'll also mix up a slightly darker version of this color as well to use as a shadow or accent color. This one will be a little bit more concentrated with maybe a little extra alizarin crimson in the mix. And of course, when mixing colors, it's always a good idea to test it out on a scrap piece of paper to make sure it's looking how you would like. And you can see here that if I add extra water to this color, it really lightens it up to a nice peach color, which is exactly what I'm looking for today. In fact, sometimes you can simply make the color lighter by dipping the tip of the brush in the paint first, and then afterwards just dipping it in the cup of water. Then I'll start at the center point that I marked on my page and begin painting in some nice large petal shapes using just a few strokes of the brush. Now I'm planning on having the ends of the petals a little bit more uneven or jagged so that they look a little more loose and abstract. So you really don't have to worry too much about rounding these off perfectly. I'll go ahead and quickly paint in several more of these petals to create a nice open flower shape. And you'll notice that a lot of these are going to be slightly overlapping or touching at some point. We're just having fun. We're painting a nice loose flower, so don't worry too much about having the perfect shape or making all of the petals the exact same either. Now, while those petals are still a little bit wet, we can come back in here with some extra paint and add that in maybe on some of the tips of the petals as well as the center of the flower. And this is going to create more dimension. Then I'll take some of that darker shadow color and add a little bit of that in here too. And you can see this is really starting to make the flower pop, and it helps it not look quite so flat. All right, pretty good. Let's go ahead and paint in the second flower head just below this first one. I really hope you're just having fun with this loose painting today. This is just a no pressure, stress-free piece. The idea is to just enjoy the painting process. If you find that you are enjoying my painting and teaching style today, I hope you'll subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so you don't miss more of my upcoming weekly tutorials. This one ended up with fewer petals, I think, but that's not a problem. We're just going with the flow, right? So just for fun, maybe we can also add in a little bud here off to the side. And of course, you can add in some of that darker color in here as well. All right, while we let that finish drying, let me show you some fun leaf strokes that you can paint in with the cat's tongue brush. And like I say, if you don't have a cat's tongue handy, you can just paint in some similar shapes using the round brush instead. I think I'll use a couple of different greens for the leaves today to add a bit of variety to the piece. I have here some olive green, and then maybe let's try a little bit of hooker's green as well. In fact, I might even add just a touch of ivory black into the hooker's green just to darken it up even more. Now, I have a couple of different leaf shapes that we can try out with this brush, but something nice about this brush is that because it has such a nice pointy tip, we can also paint in some pretty thin lines with it as well. So I'll go ahead and maybe paint in a stem line that we can use as the base for some of the leaves to come off of. Then for these first leaves, I'll just take a little bit of this olive green color and simply use the shape of the brush to its advantage, starting the stroke with the point of the brush and then pressing down to make the stroke thick in the middle and then letting up on it again at the end. To make some leaves maybe slightly smaller, you can turn the brush a little bit so that when you press down, you don't use the full width of the brush. This way they turn out a little bit more thin. I'll just paint several of these leaf shapes all the way down, and this creates a really nice stem of leaves. Now, before I show you the second leaf shape that these can make that are even more fun to paint with this brush, let's paint some greenery around the little bud here really quickly, just using more of the tip of the brush so that they're thin and small. I think I'll go ahead and even add in the starts of some stem lines for these main flowers as well. Okay, that's a good start. Now, this is the part I have been so excited to share with you. Let me show you the coolest loose leaf strokes ever that this cat's tongue can make. Now I'll start the stroke off with the thin flat side of the brush first, then I'll slightly turn the brush and press down for the center of the leaf. Then I'll actually turn the brush back to the thin side and keep pulling out just a little ways for a thin point. Isn't that such a neat shape? Another way to do this stroke is to basically use that same technique, but instead of turning the brush back to how it was initially, I'll just continue to turn the brush around so that I'm almost creating a half circle rotation, starting with one of the sides of the brush and ending with the other. These are really super fun to paint, and actually a lot of the time, even though you'll use the same stroke, each leaf will look slightly different. And at this point, you can paint in as many as you like down here at the base of the page using either green color or even a mix of the two, just whatever you'd like to try. Also, just as another option I'll throw out there, you can add two of these leaf strokes together and create a broad, more fat leaf shape as well. Maybe at this point I'll paint in the rest of the stems of these flowers just to start to connect everything together a little bit. And really at this point you could call the greenery done for this painting if you wanted to, or you could go ahead and add in a few more leaves here and there. I might go ahead and add a few more, maybe even painting some of them super light in value just to make them a little different or make them look like they're more into the background. Really, you can add whatever you feel like your painting needs. All right, I think I'd better call the greenery done before I get too carried away and go overboard. But let's go ahead and pull out the rigger brush now and paint in the centers of the flowers next. Now I want this color to be dark to create a good contrast. So maybe I'll take some burnt umber or even a touch of ivory black and mix that together into what's left of this darker orangey color. I'll just paint in some nice thin and maybe slightly curved lines here in the center of the flower, and then to finish it off and give it some character, I'll add some dots at the tops of those lines too. Now, as an optional step, you can even take some of this light, watery orange color and paint in some vein lines on the flower petals using the rigger brush. Now, you don't want them to be too dark though, just a hint of them, and a little of these can go a long way, so don't get carried away. Maybe I'll even add some thin vein lines on some of these larger leaves as well. And I think that's it for today's painting. That was just relaxing and fun to do. If I did this over again, I may do it a little bit different, but you know what? Sometimes it's just fun to paint for the sake of painting and not worry too much how it turns out the end. But hopefully you had some fun with your piece. If you did enjoy this tutorial, I hope you'll consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to help you discover your artistic side.